Please be seated. Good morning, St. Stephen's. So nice to be with you this week, and I'm so grateful that we have a much cheerier gospel reading than we did last Sunday with all of Matthew and his legal law code stuff. This morning, I would like to look at the images our gospel story gives to us and what they might tell us. The first image is the easiest for us modern people to overlook. This is the image of being on a mountaintop. Excuse me. In the tradition of the ancient religion of the Hebrews, people believed that climbing to the top of a mountain would literally put them physically closer to God. The most powerful image in our story is that of the transfigured Jesus himself. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Jesus is standing there next to the two great prophets of the tradition, Moses and Elijah. And Matthew tells us Jesus literally outshines these two greatest guys. That's a powerful image. Isn't it interesting how the disciples respond to this vision? Very casually. Almost like it's an everyday occurrence to see Moses and Elijah. Oh, let's make some tents so you all will be a little more comfortable. Then we move to the next image, the theophany of God's presence in the form of his voice coming from a bright cloud. And what do we see next? We see that this frightens the disciples. Moses and Elijah weren't particularly frightening, but God's presence, there's something to be afraid of. When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear, Matthew tells us. And now what do we see next? And most important image, I believe the most important in the entire story. We see how Jesus responds. What is it that Jesus does first? Does he tell the disciples not to be afraid? Well, yes, eventually. But this isn't what he does first. Did you notice? First, Jesus reaches out and touches them. Then he tells them, do not be afraid. So aside from this story telling us who Jesus is, who he really is, the story also tells us what he does for us. He's the one who touches us and takes away our fear. We who are just like the disciples, living our life in our sinful nature, have nothing to fear if we let Jesus touch us and take away our fear. One last observation on the imagery of the Transfiguration, and this is also what Jesus does for us. The German theologian Romano Guardini described the Transfiguration as the summer lightning of the coming resurrection, also of our own resurrection, for we too will take part in that transfigured life. We too will be transfigured someday. And just to be clear, transfiguration is not the same as transformation. Transfiguration is the preview of coming attractions. Throughout our entire life, if we work at it, our spiritual journey transforms us. Always remember, please, in the economics of our salvation, the currency we spend is spiritual. As we travel the spiritual journey, we are able to say, I am no longer the person I was a year ago, 5 years ago. This is how we are transformed into the image and likeness of God we all have in the created nature of our being. And if we are faithful and work at this all of our life, transfiguration is what waits for us in the next life. So maybe after we leave church today and go out into that wide world we all live in, maybe this week we can hold on to this image of Jesus being transfigured and touching his disciples and touching us also. Then we need never be afraid of anything in our life. Amen.